The wind whispered through the ancestral leaves when I felt the weight of responsibility descend upon my shoulders like an invisible cape. My hand trembled, something that had never happened to me before, while I held the sacred bow that my father, Orunmila, had forged from the wood of the first baobab. Before me, through the morning mist rising from the wounded earth, I could see the red eyes of the creature that had devastated everything I loved. It watched me with cruel intelligence, knowing that this moment would define not only my destiny, but the future of the entire forest and my village. The arrow in my hand pulsed with ancestral energy, as if all the spirits of the forest were channeling their strength through it. It was now or never. One shot. A single opportunity. The silence was so profound that I could hear my own heart beating like a war drum. It was at that moment that I truly understood what it meant to be Oxosi. My name is Oxosi, and as far back as I can remember, the forest has been my home, my mother, my teacher. I was born in the shadow of centennial trees, where every falling leaf told a story, every swaying branch whispered ancestral secrets. My mother, Yemanja, always said I was born with the gift of precision, that my eyes could see beyond what was in front of me, discerning the true essence of things. I grew up running through the secret paths of the forest, learning the language of birds, the rhythm of insects, the murmur of leaves. Every morning, when the sun rose painting the sky gold, I would rise before everyone in the village and walk to the heart of the forest. There, seated under the great sacred tree, a majestic cecropia that rose like a portal between worlds, I would meditate and feel the pulse of life around me. The forest was not just a place for me, it was an extension of my soul. I could sense when a tree was sick, when an animal was injured, when the natural balance was disturbed. It was as if my heart was connected by invisible threads to every living being in that green immensity. It was during one of those mornings of contemplation that I received my first bow. I was only 12 years old, but I already showed a natural skill for hunting. My father, Orunmila, the great diviner, had silently observed my evolution. He knew the right moment had come. "Oxosi," he said, his deep voice echoing among the trees. "A true hunter does not hunt only to sustain the body. He hunts to maintain balance. The forest offers us what we need, but in return, we must protect it with our lives." The bow he handed me was different from any I had seen, made of sacred wood, carved with symbols that seemed to pulse with their own light. It vibrated in my hands as if it were alive. The moment I touched it, I felt a deep connection to something much greater than myself. "This bow," my father continued, "has been blessed by the ancestral spirits. Its arrows will find the target not only through your skill, but through the righteousness of your intention. Always remember, true precision comes from the heart, not just the eyes." In the months that followed, I devoted myself entirely to perfecting my art. I rose before dawn when the forest was still shrouded in mist, and practiced until my fingers were raw. I learned to breathe with the wind, to move like a shadow, to think like my prey. Every shot was a prayer, every arrow an extension of my will. More importantly, I learned to listen. The forest spoke constantly, through the song of birds, the rustling of leaves, the distant roar of felines. It told me about the cycles of nature, the animals that needed protection, the plants that held healing secrets. I became its ears, its eyes, its protector. The village began to call me Infallible Eye, for my arrows never missed their mark. But I knew my skill went beyond mere aim. It was a communion with the very essence of life. When I aimed, it was not just Oxosi holding the bow, it was all the spirits of the forest guiding my hand. It was on an afternoon of stifling heat, when the air was so still that not a leaf stirred, that I noticed the first signs that something was wrong. I was returning from a hunt, carrying a deer I had slain to feed the village elders, when a shiver ran down my spine. The silence was different from usual, not the peaceful silence of day's end, but something tense, laden with fear. The birds had stopped singing. The insects had fallen silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. In the forest, absolute silence always meant danger. I stopped in the middle of the path, set the deer down and closed my eyes, extending my senses. I could feel something different, a strange presence like a dark stain on the luminous tapestry of forest life. It was as if something was sucking the vital energy from the trees, leaving a cold void in its place. I followed the sensation to a clearing I knew well. It was a sacred place, where the oldest trees gathered in a circle, creating a natural amphitheater where spirits usually danced under the moonlight. But now, what I saw left me speechless. The trees were dying. Not a natural, slow, and dignified death, but something violent and sudden. Their leaves were yellowed and fallen, their branches bent as if in agony. The very air in the clearing seemed dense and hard to breathe. At the center of the circle, where there had once been a crystalline spring that never dried up, there was now only dark mud and a fetid odor that made my eyes water. And there, embedded in the earth like open wounds, were enormous footprints, larger than those of any animal I knew, with claws that had left deep furrows in the soil. My heart raced. In all my years in the forest, I had never seen anything like it. These footprints belonged to no natural creature. There was something malevolent there, something that did not kill just to survive, but destroyed for pure pleasure. I knelt by the dead spring and touched the water with my fingertips. Immediately, a vision struck me like lightning. I saw a monstrous creature, with fur black as the darkest night, eyes glowing like embers, and fangs dripping venom. It was not just a predator. It was a manifestation of destruction itself, a force that fed on death and chaos. The vision showed more. The creature had emerged from the depths of the earth where it had slept for centuries, held prisoner by the ancestors' spells. But something had broken those spells. Something or someone had released this abomination, and now it roamed the forest, leaving a trail of death and desolation. When the vision ended, I found myself trembling. Not from fear, a hunter cannot afford fear, but from fury. My forest, my home, was being profaned by this creature. The animals I protected were being decimated. The plants I loved were dying. I stood up and looked around the destroyed clearing. In the deadly silence, I made a solemn promise to the spirits of the forest. I would find this creature and destroy it, even if it cost my own life. The forest had given me everything, my identity, my purpose, my strength. It was now my turn to repay it. I took my bow and checked my quiver. I had 20 arrows, each blessed and sharpened to perfection. But I knew ordinary arrows would not suffice against this creature. I would need something more, something that carried the power of the forest spirits themselves. I walked to the oldest tree in the clearing, a centennial sapukaya that miraculously still resisted the curse. I placed my hand on its trunk and felt its vital force pulsing, weak but persistent. "Ancient Mother," I whispered, "I need your help. I need an arrow that can pierce the darkness and restore the light. Will you give me a branch of your sacred wood?" The tree trembled gently, and I heard a dry crack. A small but perfect branch fell at my feet. When I picked it up, it was warm to the touch, pulsing with ancestral energy. I knew there was work ahead of me. I would have to forge a special arrow, one that carried not only my skill but the entire strength of the forest. And then, I would have to find the creature before it destroyed everything I loved. As I walked back to the village carrying the sacred branch, I could feel the eyes of the forest upon me. Every tree, every animal, every spirit was waiting. They knew the decisive moment was approaching. The battle for the heart of the forest was about to begin. Dear listeners of this ancestral journey, feel the weight of the responsibility that descended upon my shoulders at that moment. As Okshosi, I carry not only a bow, but the destiny of the entire forest. Do you know that feeling when something we love is threatened? When we must find strengths we didn't even know we possessed? The story is just beginning, and I can already feel your souls connected to my journey. Stay with me, for what is to come will test not only my precision as a hunter, but my faith as a guardian of nature. The moon was full that night, bathing the village in its silver light when I headed to my father's sacred forge. It was a special place, built at the center of a circle of ancestral stones, where the fire never completely went out. The flames there were fed not only by wood but by the very spiritual essence of our ancestors. Orunmila was waiting for me, as if he knew I would come. His wise eyes reflected the light of the flames as he observed the sacred branch I carried. I didn't need to explain anything. He saw everything, understood everything. "The creature has awakened," he said, his voice echoing among the stones. It was not a question, but a statement laden with sadness and determination. "Yes, Father, and it is destroying everything." My words came out charged with a pain I could barely contain. "I need an arrow that can pierce its malice, that carries the full strength of the forest." Orunmila nodded slowly and motioned for me to approach the forge. The heat was intense, but there was something more, an energy that made my skin tingle and my heart beat faster. "My son," he said, placing his hand on my shoulder, "forging a sacred arrow is not just about shaping wood and metal. It is about infusing it with a part of your own soul. Are you ready for this sacrifice?" I looked at the dancing flames and felt an absolute clarity wash over me. Yes, Father. The forest has given me everything. It is time to give back. We began the ritual at dawn. First, Oromila taught me to prepare the branch from the centennial sapukaya. Every movement had meaning. Every spoken word carried power. I sat before the forge and began carving the wood with a ceremonial knife, whispering ancestral prayers. As I worked, I could feel the wood responding to my touch. It was as if it were alive, pulsing with the same energy I felt in the forest. Every chip that fell to the ground glowed for a moment before turning into golden dust. Now, said my father, you must add something of yourself. Without hesitation, I took the knife and made a small cut in my palm. The blood that dripped onto the wood was absorbed instantly, and the arrow began to glow with a soft, almost imperceptible light. But it was not yet complete. The tip was missing. Oromila handed me a piece of metal unlike anything I had seen. It was dark as the deepest night, but with golden veins that seemed alive, pulsing like a heart. This metal, he explained, was forged in the heart of the first storm, when the Oryxas still walked among mortals. It was Ogum who created it, and Zango who blessed it with the power of lightning. Only a creature of pure malice can be wounded by it. We spent 3 days and 3 nights forging the arrow's tip. With each hammer blow, I channeled not only my physical strength, but my entire connection to the forest. I could feel the presence of the spirits of the trees, the animals, the ancestors, all uniting their energies with mine. On the 3rd day, when the sun rose, painting the sky in impossible colors, the arrow was ready. It rested in my hands like an extension of my own soul, light as a feather, but charged with ancestral power. The wood glowed with a soft, golden light, and the metal tip seemed to absorb the light around it, creating small swirls of darkness and light. It is done, whispered Oromila, and for the first time in years I saw tears in his eyes. May the ancestors guide it to its destiny. With the sacred arrow in my quiver, I set out to track the creature. It was not difficult to find its trail. Wherever it passed, it left a path of death and desolation. Trees withered, rivers turned muddy, and the very air became heavy and hard to breathe. I followed its footprints for 2 days, crossing regions of the forest I knew like the back of my hand, but which now seemed strange and hostile. The creature was not just killing, it was corrupting everything around it, transforming natural beauty into something dark and threatening. On the 2nd night, I camped near a stream that still ran clear, one of the few the creature had not yet touched. As I prepared my fire, I heard a sound that chilled my blood, a long, melancholic howl, laden with a sadness so deep it seemed to come from the depths of the earth. It was not the cry of a predator hunting. It was something far more disturbing, the lament of a tormented soul. Suddenly I understood something that completely changed my perspective on the creature. It was not just a monster destroying out of malice. There was something deeper, an ancestral pain driving it. That howl was a cry of despair, a plea for help echoing through the centuries. I closed my eyes and extended my senses, trying to capture more information. In the depths of my meditation, I had a vision that left me chilled. I saw the creature in its original form, not a monster, but a guardian spirit of the forest, like me. Its name was Kayapo, and it had been tasked with protecting the deepest regions of the forest, where the ancestral trees guarded the secrets of creation. But something had gone wrong. A spiritual plague, a poison of the soul, had infected Kayapo, transforming his love for the forest into a desperate need to possess it completely. His protection had become possession. His care had become destruction. He could no longer distinguish between preserving and dominating. What shocked me most was realizing that I could suffer the same fate. All of us, guardians of nature, carried this risk. The line between protection and possession was thinner than I imagined. When I opened my eyes, I found myself facing a dilemma I had not anticipated. How could I destroy someone who, deep down, was like me? How could I kill a spirit that had lost itself while trying to fulfill its mission? But then I looked around and saw the dying trees, heard the silence where there should be life, felt the void where there should be abundance. Kayapo, in his madness, was destroying exactly what he had sworn to protect. If I did not stop him, there would be nothing left of the forest to protect. On the 3rd day, I finally found Kayapo. He was at the center of a clearing that had once been one of the most sacred places in the forest, where the mother trees were born, those that gave birth to all others. Now, it was a desert of parched earth and skeletal trees. The creature was even more impressive than I had imagined. larger than a jaguar with black fur that absorbed light, red eyes glowing like embers, and a presence that made the air itself vibrate with tension. But what impressed me most was the sadness emanating from him. Even corrupted, even transformed into an instrument of destruction, Kaipo still carried vestiges of the guardian he had been. He saw me and stopped, staring at me across the dead clearing. For a moment that seemed eternal, we stood there, two guardians of the forest, one incorruptible, the other lost in his own mission. "Kaipo," I called, my voice echoing in the absolute silence. "I know who you were. I know what you were trying to protect." The creature tilted its head, and for an instant its red eyes seemed to clear, as if the ancient guardian was struggling to emerge through the corruption. "You can feel it too," he said, his voice a mix of roar and human whisper. "The forest is dying, Oxosi. Not because of me, but because of other threats you can't even imagine. I have only accelerated the inevitable." His words struck me like arrows. What other threats? Men coming from afar, with tools that cut faster than our axes. Men who do not understand that every felled tree is a lost soul. They are coming, Oshosi, and when they arrive, our forest will be nothing but a memory. A shiver ran down my spine. I had had fragmented visions of this, but I had never fully understood. Kaipo's corruption was not just internal, it was a desperate response to a threat he could see, but could not fight in a sane way. "So you decided to kill it first?" I asked, feeling a mix of understanding and horror. "If I cannot save it," he roared, and his form grew larger, "then no one will have it. Better that it dies by my claws, with love, than by the hands of those who see it only as a resource." It was a distorted logic born of despair and spiritual corruption. Kaipo had lost himself trying to control a future that could not be controlled, and his attempt at protection had become the very destruction he feared. "No," I said, drawing my bow and nocking the sacred arrow. "The forest does not need to die to be saved. It needs to live to find its own path through the threats that will come." Kaipo's eyes glowed with renewed fury. "You are young, Oshosi. You still believe that love is enough. When you see what I have seen, you will understand that true love sometimes demands terrible sacrifices." He prepared to attack, and I knew the moment of truth had arrived. It was not just a battle between two guardians. It was a battle between two philosophies on how to protect what we love, between control, born of fear, and trust born of faith. I drew back my bowstring, feeling the sacred arrow pulse with ancestral energy. I knew that, regardless of the outcome, neither of us would leave this battle the same as we entered it. The forest held its breath, waiting to see which vision of protection would prevail. My dear listeners, can you feel the weight of this revelation? As Oxosi, I discovered that our enemies are not always purely evil. Sometimes, they are distorted reflections of ourselves, lost in the very love they feel for what they protect. The final confrontation approaches, but now it carries a complexity I had not anticipated. How can we distinguish between protection and possession, between love and control? These are questions we all face in our own journeys. Stay with me, for the true test of the sacred arrow, and of my own nature as a guardian, is about to take place. Kaipo's attack was like a storm of ancestral fury. He lunged across the clearing with a speed that defied the eyes, his claws leaving deep furrows in the parched earth. But I had prepared for this my entire life, not just to hunt, but to understand the rhythm of nature, the flow of life and death. I rolled to the side, feeling the wind from his claws pass millimeters from my face. The sacred arrow was still in my bow, but something inside me hesitated. It was not fear. It was the understanding that this was not just a physical fight, but a spiritual battle between two souls who had chosen different paths for the same goal. "You don't understand," roared Kaipo, turning with supernatural agility to face me again. "I have seen the future, Oxosi. I have seen machines that cut down 1,000 trees in a day, rivers turned to mud, our sacred forest reduced to ashes." His words carried a pain so deep that I wavered for a moment. I too had had fragmented visions of this future, disturbing dreams that woke me in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat. But I had chosen to trust in the forest's ability to adapt, to find ways to survive that I could not yet imagine. "And for that, you decided to kill it first?" I shouted, dodging another attack that split 3 dead trees in half. "For that, you chose to become the very destruction you feared?" Kaipo paused for an instant, and in that moment of hesitation, I saw not the monster he had become, but the desperate guardian still dwelling somewhere within that corrupted form. His red eyes flickered, and for a second, They shone with the golden light that all protectors of the forest carry. "I love it too much to see it suffer," he whispered, and his voice carried centuries of loneliness and despair. "Better that it sleeps forever in peace than awaken to a world that does not understand it." It was at that moment that I understood the true nature of my mission. The sacred arrow I carried had not been forged just to destroy Kayapo. It had been created to heal him, to pierce the corruption and reach the still, pure heart beating beneath all that darkness. "Kayapo," I said, lowering my bow but keeping the arrow ready, "you are right about the threats that will come, but you are wrong about our ability to face them. The forest is stronger than you imagine, and we are more than its guardians. We are its seeds of renewal." He looked at me with a mix of contempt and curiosity. Beautiful words from a young one who has not yet seen the true horror approaching. "Then show me," I challenged. "Show me these visions that torment you. Let me share your burden." Kayapo hesitated, and in that hesitation I saw an opening. Not an opportunity to attack, but a chance for connection. I closed my eyes and opened my mind, extending my spiritual senses toward him. "I accept your offer," he said, and his voice sounded almost human. "But know that once seen, these images will never leave you." What happened next was like being struck by a bolt of pure vision. Through Kayapo's eyes I saw centuries of changes yet to come. I saw men with pale skin arriving in great canoes that breathed fire, bringing tools that cut wood faster than any axe. I saw centennial trees falling like weeds, rivers diverted from their natural courses, animals fleeing in panic from territories their families had inhabited for generations. But I saw more than destruction. I saw adaptation. I saw some trees learning to grow in different soils, animals developing new behaviors to survive, men of goodwill fighting to protect what remained of the forest. And above all, I saw the forest itself, finding forms of regeneration that defied all logic. "You see," asked Kayapo, his voice echoing directly in my mind, "you see the horror that awaits us." "I see change," I replied, keeping my mind open to the visions. "I see challenges, but also possibilities. The forest is not just a place, Kayapo. It is an idea, a principle of life that can flourish even in the most adverse conditions." In the visions, I showed him what I had learned in my years as a hunter and protector. I showed small seeds germinating in arid soils, animals developing new forms of cooperation, trees growing in unlikely places. I showed that life always finds a way, even when that way is impossible to predict. "But so many lives will be lost," he groaned, and his gigantic form began to tremble. "Yes," I admitted, feeling the weight of that truth. "There will be losses, there will be suffering, but there will also be rebirth, and we, as guardians, are not here to control this process. We are here to facilitate it, to ensure that the essence of the forest survives the changes." When the visions ended, I found myself on my knees in the clearing, with Kayapo sitting before me like a gigantic wounded dog. The corruption was still there, but now I could see through it, could see the original guardian struggling to emerge. "You still don't understand," he said, but his voice had lost its earlier fury. "The love I feel for this forest is like a fire that consumes me. I cannot simply trust that everything will be fine." "I know," I replied, rising slowly, "because I feel the same fire. The difference is that I have learned to use this fire to illuminate the path, not to burn everything around." I took up my bow again, but this time with a completely different intention. The sacred arrow pulsed in my hand, and I finally understood its true purpose. It was not a weapon of destruction. It was an instrument of purification. "What will you do?" asked Kayapo, but there was no fear in his voice, only weary curiosity. "I will heal you," I said, aiming not at his physical heart but at the spiritual center where the corruption had taken root. "I will use this arrow to pierce your pain and reach the guardian you still are." Kayapo closed his eyes and lowered his head. "Do what must be done." I breathed deeply, feeling all the energy of the forest flowing through me. It was not just my skill guiding the arrow. It was all the spirits of the trees, all the animals that had trusted me, all the ancestors who had protected this land before me. When I released the string, the arrow flew not only through the air but through spiritual dimensions. It pierced Kayapo's physical form and struck directly at the core of his corruption, that knot of despair and fear that had transformed his love into possession. The light that followed was like the birth of a star. Golden and pure, it emanated from the point where the arrow had struck, spreading across Kayapo's entire form. I saw the darkness of his fur replaced by an amber glow, his red eyes reclaiming their original golden color, his monstrous form transforming back into that of a noble and serene guardian. When the light finally dissipated, Kayapo stood before me in his true form, a majestic spirit of the forest, with golden fur that shone like sunlight filtered through leaves. His eyes, now clear and wise, fixed me with a gratitude that transcended words. "Thank you," he whispered, and his voice was like the murmur of leaves in the wind. "Thank you for reminding me who I really am." With Kayapo's purification, something extraordinary began to happen. The dead clearing around us began to green again, not quickly, but with the irresistible constancy of life itself. Green shoots emerged from the parched earth, the dead spring began to bubble again with crystalline water, and the air pulsed once more with the vital energy I knew so well. "How is this possible?" I asked, marveling at the transformation. Kayapo smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I saw on his face. The corruption that inhabited me was poisoning the land itself. With it purified, the forest can heal. But there is more than that. He walked to the center of the clearing and touched the soil with his paw. Immediately, a tree began to sprout. Not an ordinary tree, but something I had never seen before. Its leaves were golden and green at the same time. Its trunk radiated a soft light, and its branches seemed to extend both to the sky and to dimensions I could not fully perceive. "This is the tree of renewal," explained Kayapo. "It will grow here in this place where corruption was purified by true love. Its roots will spread throughout the entire forest, strengthening it against the changes to come. And its seeds—" He looked at me with a special gleam in his eyes. "Its seeds can be planted anywhere the forest needs to be reborn." I immediately understood the implications. This tree was not just a plant, it was a promise, a guarantee that no matter how much destruction came, there would always be a way for the forest to be reborn. Kayapo's dark visions might still come true, but now there was a real hope for renewal. "And now?" I asked. "What do we do with this knowledge?" Kayapo approached and placed his paw on my shoulder. "Now we prepare. You as the guardian who acts in the present, guiding and protecting. I as the visionary who will prepare for the future, planting the seeds of renewal where they will be needed. Together, we will ensure that the essence of the forest survives any transformation." I felt a profound change within me. I was no longer just Oxosi, the solitary hunter. Now I was part of something greater, a network of guardians working across time and space to protect life in all its forms. Months passed since that day in the clearing. The tree of renewal grew into a golden giant visible from several parts of the forest. Its seeds, carried by the wind and animals, germinated in places where the forest had been damaged, creating small oases of renewal. Kayapo and I developed a unique partnership. He used his visions to identify areas that would need special protection in the future, while I used my skills to prepare those areas in the present. It was as if we were weaving a network of protection through time. The sacred arrow never left my quiver, but its nature had changed. It was no longer a weapon of last resort but a symbol of hope. Its golden light constantly reminded me that true precision lies not in hitting the target we want to destroy, but in finding the path that leads to healing. Today, when I walk the paths of the forest, I see the future differently. Yes, there will be challenges. Yes, there will be changes that test our capacity for adaptation. But there will also be unimaginable opportunities for growth and renewal. The forest taught me that life is not about controlling the future, but about planting the right seeds in the present. Every tree I protect, every animal I help, every path I keep clean, is a seed of possibility for the world yet to come. And when travelers pass by the tree of renewal, they always stop and ask about its origin. I tell them this story, about how the true strength of a guardian lies not in his ability to destroy what threatens what he loves, but in his skill at finding the light that still shines in the heart of darkness. Oxosi's arrow was not made to kill but to heal, not to end stories but to allow them to continue being written. And as long as there is life in the forest, as long as there are seeds to plant and stories to tell, this arrow will remain a symbol that true love always finds its way to precision. Because in the end, I discovered that the greatest hunt of all is not for the prey we want to slay, but for the wisdom that allows us to protect what we love without losing ourselves in the process. Dear companions of this ancestral journey, we have reached the end of my story, but you know that every conclusion is also a new beginning. As Oxosi, I learned that our true strength as protectors lies not in the firmness of our fist, but in the precision of our heart. Each of you carries your own sacred arrow, whether made of words, actions, love, or courage, and each has your own forest to protect, whether made of trees, relationships, dreams, or hopes. Remember, true precision is not in always hitting the target, but in always aiming at what can bring healing and renewal to the world. May you find your own tree of renewal, plant your own seeds of possibility, and may your arrows always fly guided by the ancestral wisdom that connects us all. May this story awaken in you the same deep connection to nature and to your own purpose that it awakened in me, until our paths cross again on the infinite trails of existence. Akse.